Hello, everybody. Good evening and good morning or good afternoon. So, welcome to our live. Uh, welcome to the book, the continuous of our book study book, The Evolution Towards. This is the part 7, and Watanabe. It is with us, helping us with these studies. Uh, if you missed any one of the previous lives, just go to iSpiritist Federation YouTube or FESP YouTube, and you have all the lessons recorded there, so you can uh, understand where you are and all the work we are doing in all those years. These years we are working here together. So, good evening, Watanabe. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine, Stefan. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Let's continue our study.
Yes, good. Okay. So, let me do the initial prayer. So, let's raise up our thoughts. Let's make connection with superior spirits, with our mentors, with mentors of ESP and the I Spiritist Federation. Ask them to enlighten our guests today, Roberto Watanabe, giving him all the support to give us this message, and may this message reach out our friends who are globally. May this message reach them, reach those who are live with us and those who will watch us in the future. So thank you so much. So be it. Amen. Okay, let me see the comments if you do have any comments here. So good evening, Pachi. Good to have you here. Thank you for your support. And let me put the slides. Can you see
Yes, I
the
can.
slides? Okay, good. Okay, my friend, it is with you from now.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Stefan. So, hello, everybody again. Glad to be here to continue our study of this book, Evolution in Two Worlds. And we are going to study it in 8 parts. In the first 6 parts, we studied part 1 of the book. And then in the last 2 parts of our presentation, part 7 and next month, part 8, we will study the part 2 of the book. Okay, so in this part 2 of the book, the spirit André Luiz, who dictated this book through the mediumship of Chico Xavier, one of the most famous medium here in Brazil. He passed away in 2002. And then in the part 2 of the book, André Luiz described to us some aspects of life in the spirit world. And then he also describes some aspects of life in our corporeal world too, right? So today we are going to see his description of life in the spiritual world, and we'll see uh, uh, some slides about the life in the corporeal world. And then next month, we will finish the book with the other slides about the life in the corporeal world. Okay, so let's start with the life in the spiritual world. In this part, André Luiz is is telling us about how life is in the spiritual world, right? So that's what we are going to see. For example, regarding the nourishment of a discarnate, right? Because we know that the discarnate don't have digestive system, right, in their bodies, because they don't need to eat solid food like we do. And then what Andrea Luis says is that there are these carnates that are strongly attached to physical sensations. So those spirits, they remain yoked to the familiar biological world, right? So they remain attached to the sensation. So actually, although they don't have any more a physical body, just a spiritual body, they feel they feel the sensation of a lack of food, right? They they feel thirsty, for example, and then they feel hungry, and then they provoke the phenomena of psychical symbiosis. That means that they, although they are now they are discarnate, do remain attached to normally to their families, right? So they remain together with them. Then by the time the incarnate familiar familiar people are going to have a lunch, for example, they participate in that lunch, right, in some way. Of course, they don't need the food, but they for example, they aspire the smell of the food, and that give them some sensation of satisfaction, right? So then this happens for some time. Then after that, they are taken to centers of re-education in the spiritual world, right? We have lots of colonies, spiritual cities, and then they receive nourishment like that we have here on earth, but such kind of nourishment is fluidic, right? Is not solid food. It's a fluidic food, let's say, right? And this happens until they can adapt themselves to the life in the spiritual world, because in the spiritual world we don't need to have nourishment like we have here on earth, right? We have a proper sustenance systems there in the spiritual world. Mainly what we could say is that they spirits get what they need in terms of this nourishment uh, uh, by let's say by through their spiritual body, right? A kind of a let's say from the environment, from the air. It's like if we, for example, here in the corporeal world, imagine that we feed themselves just by through breathing, for example, right? To or through the the let's say the sun rays, for example, right? So that similar some similar of this happens in the spiritual world, and this is the proper sustenance system there, right? But until such kind of a discarnate that are strongly attached to the corporeal world doesn't don't learn how to do that, they pass through this stage that we just presented here, right? So, and well, here we have, right? Nourishment in the spiritual world is done through the spiritual body cutaneous absorption, right? Like I said, right? It's cutaneous absorption. You don't need to eat, right? Through a mouth, get food in their mouth, for example. They absorb what they need through their spiritual body, and not from a particular part, right? And the spirit nourish itself with subtle products, right? Or chemical electromagnetic synthesis. So it's not solid food, but it's kind of a subtle products. And where they come from? They come from the reservoirs of nature, right? And the exchange of vitalizing rays of love with which beings sustain one another. So this is very interesting, right? Because we they they feed themselves with such subtle products that they absorb it through their spiritual body, but they also, let's say, feed themselves through the exchange of a rays of love, right? That they sustain among themselves, right? Sustain one another, as Anjali says here. And then, so the spiritual body there in the spiritual world is that to carry out the processes of assimilation and disassimilation of the resources that are peculiar to the spiritual world, right? So this is something interesting to know, because we know that we have studied that in this book and in this book before, that when we pass away, there are some changes in our, let's say, our organic system, right? We don't need, and we have a big change in our digestive system. And so we see here what that happens. And we also have some changes in our reproduction system, right? Because we don't, as we don't need to eat or to drink in the spiritual world, we also don't have sex there, right? So there are the two main parts of our body, organic system, that changes when we go from the corporeal world through the spiritual world through the process of death, right? So that's what we have about the nourishment of discarnate. And what about the language of discarnate, how they communicate within among themselves, right? So the language of the spirit, and Andrea Luis says, is above all the image it exteriorizes from itself. So it's like, imagine that we are here in our corporeal world, and I want to communicate with you that are listening to me, and then I exteriorize from myself images, like a movie, right? A scene of a movie. And then you receive that scene of that movie, and then you understand what I'm trying to communicate, right? So that's how it works there on the spiritual world. They don't as they don't have a mouth to eat food, they don't need a mouth to say words, for example, right? So they communicate through such images. In general, we say they communicate through thought, directly with thought, right? And such thought expresses through the images that we are saying here. And you see here that the sublimate the spirits, they use their own thoughts, right, to creating living pictures that convey their message or teaching, right? But and in the same way, Andrea Luis says, the spirit Andrea Luis, the author of the book, he says that the unhappy intelligence also, they can form afflictive projections in closed mental circuits over the minds they control. And so this is a situation when we have, for example, obsession, an obsessive process, right? When a low order spirit, let's say, form afflictive projections, like, for example, they project a monster form, and I, as I incarnate, I receive that image, right? And then by this way, they can affect us, right? That is the obsessive process. In this case, I am talking about a communication between a discarnate and we as incarnate, right? But they can do the same among themselves there on the spiritual world, right? So that's what Del is saying here, is always with the creation of images, right? And the mediums receive the communicating spirits ideograms and transmit them in their own words. So here, that is very interesting, because, for example, let's take an example of a psychophonic medium, right? A talking medium. So the spirits get close to that medium, then the spirit communicates with the medium through such images, right? Such ideograms. And then the medium receives that ideogram or that image in his or her mind, and then he express that what he or she understood in their own words. And interesting that, for example, if the medium is Brazilian, he will express what the ideograms that he or she received in Portuguese, right? If the medium is American, he's expressed in English and so on and so forth, right? And then what Angeli says that spoken language still is important in the regions to which ordinary people are taken immediately after death, because soon after death, the spirits are still connected, right, attached to the physical world, and then they feel the need to use a spoken language. But um, in general, after they get let's say accustomed to the spiritual world, and then they don't need that spoken language anymore, right? Because then they will communicate among themselves and also with us through such ideograms or images, right? So this is the language of discarnates. The spiritual body and volitation. The spiritual body is made of a subtle matter, right? It's not a solid matter as we have in our physical body. Then, as the spiritual body matter is very subtle, then they have let's say the possibility of volitate, right? Volitation we will see here below the note is the act or power of a flying, right? So it's interesting because here on the corporeal world, only birds fly, right? So, or airplanes, but that's an instrument that we human create. But in nature, we have only birds. In the spiritual world, and as we as a spirit have such a spiritual body made of a subtle body, then we don't have the limitations of gravity, right? So then that's why we can volitate there. That's why Delvis says that after death, individuals emerge with a natural change in muscle mass. We don't have much more the solid matter in our body, but just subtle matter. And also the digestive system, like we have seen, right? And then the spirits are equipped with different tools for their new realm, right? The realm, the spiritual realm. And then they have the possibilities of traveling and moving that they never imagined, right? That they would have while they were here on Earth, right? And this happens because under the circumstance of the spiritual world, continued thought and gravity no longer face the limitations peculiar to the body, right? So that's why there, again, when the spirit just have just passed away, he or she is still attached, right, to the corporeal world, and then they don't know how to volitate, right? But after some time, they learn how to volitate there, and then the transportation is much easier, right? They don't need airplanes, like I said, right, to transport themselves from one place to another. Although, by the description of Andrea Luiz in his series of books about the life in the spiritual world, he describes some kind of buses, or let's say, that transport spirits. But we could imagine that these are the case of spirits that are still attached here to this corporeal world and don't know how to volitate, right? But when the spirit is totally integrated in spiritual world, and then they don't need such kind of public transportation like we have here on Earth, right? So that's another interesting aspect of the life in the spiritual world. What about the morphological structure of this kind, right? What is the form of their bodies, right? So then Watanabe says that the form of their body, the morphological appearance of their bodies, discarnated bodies, is usually the same they had while incarnate, right? For example, if the spirit was a man here on earth, after passing away, in his spiritual body, he maintains, right? He keeps that presentation of a male person, right? Or female on other case, right? When the spirit were a woman here, right? And this is according to the characteristic to their inner life, meaning that as we saw in last month, the sex is not in the physical body, but the sex is on the spirit and mind, right? The spirit feels as a man, for example, like we said, when it have had a lots of incarnation as man, right? And the same as if the spirit had a lot of incarnation of a woman, right? So in his her mind, in his mind he feels a male person, and her mind she feels a female person, right? And that's how they present themselves in the spiritual world, you know. We have those cases which we also see last month of the inversion condition, right? When the spirit has a, let's say, in his mind, he's viewed as a male person, but because of the reason that we saw last month, he reincarnate in a female body, right? Or vice versa, right? A spirit that has female mind, but incarnate in a male body, right? So these on the spiritual world adjusted, right? So that's why that we said here that the discarnation frees all spirits from their masculine or feminine features which during reincarnation are in an inverse condition, right? So that means that such spirits, such males, such spirits that have in his mind, he's feels as a male person, but incarnate, he was in a female body. When he passed away and go to the spiritual world, he adjusted, right? Then there they presented them himself as a male person. So that's what Andelvis basically is saying here. Right? That does not happen only, he says, if the spirit has not made sufficient mental progress, right? Then in that case, he retains the same look as it had while incarnate. Why is that? Because as as his or her understanding is still low, he thinks that, well, I passed away. I was a woman, even if I have a male mind, let's say. But as I was a woman, then I will present myself now in the spiritual world as a woman, right? So, but that through time, that adjusts, right? Sometimes in the future, he will understand and will make the proper adjustment, right? So that's what happened here. Watanabe says also that the overwhelming majority of the spirits they will need time, some time to adjust their morphological appearance, right? So imagine, for example, that a person that passed away at the age of 90 years of old, right? So in the spiritual world, he doesn't need to present himself as in his spiritual body as a person of a 90 years old, right? So he can adjust after some time his morphological appearance and then present a younger face, let's say, right? So In general, what I would say that in the same happens with a person, for example, that let's say passed away as a children, for example, right? In the spiritual world, the spirit doesn't need to present itself as a children, right? So in general, what we learn from the spiritist books is that in general the spirit presented himself as a mature person, right? So if he had 90 years old when he passed away, then now in the spiritual world he may present himself as a man of 40 years, for example, right? And the same with the spirit that passed away as a children, right? They they presented himself as a man of 30 years, for example, right? So that's what happened there, right? So if it at a higher level, under we says, the intelligence takes the spirit it takes only a few minutes to make certain alterations in its appearance, right? So that's what he tell us about the present morphological structure of this carnage in the spiritual world. What is interesting to also to to say here is that let's take that example that I said, right? The guy passed away at the age of 90 years, right? 90 years, almost 1 century, right? Then now in the spiritual world, he presented himself as a man, as a mature person, right? Over 40 years, for example. But then let's suppose that such a spirit wants to show himself through a medium, through his family, for example, here, right? The family here, the incarnate ones here on earth. In that case, he will present himself as that man of 90 years, right? Because that was the way her family, her his family saw him, right, the last time. So, but this is just a kind of a temporary adjustment. Right? After that, they will return to their appearance of a mature person. So, it means that the spiritual body is very flexible, right? And through the mind, the spirit can adjust right? His own presentation. So that's what we learn here from this part, right? What about justice in the spiritual world? So justice, what we in general, what we learn from the spiritist literature is that the mechanism of regeneration takes place in our own conscience, right? So we don't need someone to judge us there on the spiritual world, right? So we by ourselves, soon after we pass away, we have that opportunity to make, let's say, um, um, remembrance of what or everything that we did in the last incarnation that has just finished, and then we can by our own conscience we can let's say see what the wrongs that we did and the need that we have in the future, probably in a next incarnation, to repair such wrongs, right? So that we can do by ourselves. So this is mainly what happens. But Andalui says that there are in the spiritual world a mechanism of justice which is comprised of sanctuaries and tribunals. So, and then in that case, he says that the venerable and impartial, that's important, very impartial magistrates examining human responsibilities, weighing their merit and demerit, right? So that happens when, for example, I just passed away, I'm there on the spiritual world. I make that kind of a exam of conscience, right? But there are some things that I still doesn't understand. For example, I can acknowledge that well, in my last incarnation, I tried to do my best, right? But I didn't advance enough, right? Something still keeping me uh, uh, keeping me of evolving, right? So what's happening? In that case, we could access such a kind of a mechanism, and then there we have a kind of a book of our lives, right? So then there we will acknowledge of wrongs that we did long in our past and that we don't remember anymore, and that wrongs is impacting our present life, right? So then we can take new measure, right, in our future incarnation to resolve that kind of a problem that we bring from the past, right? So, and Luis give us the description of some kind of a situation like this, right, in his series of books, right? And then and the sentence of information, right? In this case, the example that I'm giving is information, right? That I get from such sanctuaries of or tribunal is keeping with the precise harmony with the divine providence, right? Blended with the love that enlightens and the wisdom that upholds, right? So all the actions of these sanctuaries and tribunals. The main goal is to help us, right? Not to punish us. So that's basically what Andalus is saying here. Let's talk a little bit about the social life of this carnage. So what he says is that on the spirit plane, uh, closest to the physical realm, for those spirits that is still attached to the physical realm, and there are almost two-thirds, right, of discarnate. The majority of discarnate, they remain yoked, connected, right, to the earthly interest. And if they do not roam to the infernal regions, this we have seen also in our last presentations, they work fervently for their own advancement and for those who remained behind, right? So this is the case of the conscious spirit, right? Conscious of what they did of good or wrong, right? In this past incarnation. And they take on obscure tasks among incarnates and discarnates when they realize the vanity or pride that thrives within them, right? So this kind of repairment that they are trying to do. So this is very important because you see that we treat we deal with our evolution process not only here on the spirit on the corporeal world, but also on the spirit world, right? So in this case, the discount is doing a lot of good, right? There on the spiritual world to repair their past wrongs, right? So we evolve here and there, right? Always, we are always evolving if we want to, right? And then the discarnate gather themselves in cities and towns of different styles, right? For example, our home is the city where the spirit Andrea Luis lives, right? So there on those cities, they undertake important projects related to education and progress for themselves and for the benefit of others. So meaning that we work a lot there on the spiritual world, right? We study a lot there on the spiritual world. And if you want to, right? Because we have it all depended on our free will, right? And the purgatorio or infernal regions received the assistance of such spirits, right? Who lives on such cities and towns, right? Because they are more, let's say, they have a better understanding about life, right? And also, what Andrea Luis pinpointed here is that on the spiritual plane, the spiritual realm, the family group does not result from kinship, right? From let's say blood connection, let's say, right? But from affinity, right? From mental, spiritual affinity, right? That's how the family groups uh, 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 aggregate themselves there, right? The same is in some way happening here on Earth, right? Sometimes you have a friend, for example, who has no kinship with us, then we feel more attached to them than with our brothers and sisters, for example, right? So this is affinity, right? Spiritual affinity. And in the spiritual realm, that's the way the family group join together, right? So the other one third of a discarnate, which are more have a better understanding of life, then they are made up of a relatively advanced spirit, right? And then this, Delvey says, they become leaders of an upward march of their fellow brothers and sisters, right? The other two-thirds, right? So this is mainly what happens in the social life of this kind. For example, part of what the one-third will, for example, govern such a spiritual cities, right, and towns, right? So that's basically what happened there. And they, as they have better understanding, they will govern with justice, right? Looking for good, looking for the fraternity of the inhabitants of that city, right? In a very different situation compared to what we see in our corporeal world, right? Uh, Now, regarding emotional discipline, right? And then we says that sexual incontinence is not the rule of conduct on the spirit plane, right? So spirit does not remain connected to sexual thinking, right? But then there are situations where mediums, incarnate person who have access to the spiritual world, they observe regions of licentiousness, right? Well, where there are sexual incontinence, right? But what André Luis clarify us is that and those mediums are only reporting about the inferior place, right? The infernal regions and purgatory regions, right? Uh, uh, which are still where spirit is still are still attuned to brutal-like polygamy, right? So, but this is a kind of a separate place there on the spiritual world, right? In general, that is, as he says, sexual incontinence is the rule of conduct. Is not the rule of conduct. And then he also says that marriage on the higher planes involves souls joined by pure love, right? Not by physical attraction, for example, or by the interest that I have, because if I marry such person, I can have I can become a rich person, for example, right? No, it's just based on pure love, generating admirable works of progress and beauty, right? So that's what happened there regarding marriage on the higher planes, meaning that there are marriage on the higher planes also, right? But based on different conditions. About the differentiation between sexes, right? In the beginning of the planet formation here on Earth, it says, the spiritual principle we brought already with us the gender predisposition, right? To be a male and female, right? To have male or female organs, right? All of these started under the direction of the higher intelligence, right? Like we see in beginning of this book, we saw the work of the higher intelligence, and not just construction, right? The galaxies, the solar system, the planets, but also life in each planet, right? And then, however, Andalui says, the evolutionary endeavor of perfecting terrestrial humankind's physiology has not ended, meaning that, well, there, let's say, millions of years ago, or thousands of years ago, the high intelligence defined that we as humankind would uh, present ourselves in the corporeal world as male and female, right? So a person. But then that is not the end, because as we evolve in our future, still far in the future, right? But in the far future, we will gradually losing our sexual characteristic, right? Because we learn from the spirit book that the spirit by itself has not had sex, right? The human being has sex, but the spirit does not have a sex, right? Although we still have such, let's say, in our mind, we feel right, as male and female, but that such aspects will gradually disappear as we evolve. So that's why, and we talk here about the loss of the sexual characteristics, right? That will occur when we as human souls have assimilated all the experiences that we have, we need for our sublimation, living as men and women, right? Because this is also we learn from the spirit book, right? The spirit incarnate as man and woman, right? So it's not just as man or as woman. The spirit needs the experience in both the genders, right? And then there in the far future, when the spirits reach the angelic state, the state of the pure spirits, then they don't need him anymore to have such sexual characteristics, right? So that's basically what Andreas says here, right? And then they reflect in advanced degrees of perfection, he says, the divine glory of the Creator, right? So that is also interesting because in our, let's say, in our vision of God, in our Christian vision of God, we we see we see God as a male person, right? Because we call him Father, right? But actually, God has does not have any sexual characteristic, right? So this is how we as human beings, as still imperfect beings, uh, see, right, God. But this is not the real, let's say, aspect of God, right? God does not have any kind of a sexual characteristic. So a father is just a way we call God, but it doesn't mean that he's a male person. Okay, as also the pure spirits, the angels, the angels we say, which is the same of the pure spirits, they also does not have a sexual characteristics, right? So that's basically what we also will reach in the far future as we evolve. So let's just see here some slides from life in the corporeal world. Now it's not more anymore on the spiritual world, and then next month we'll see more slides about life in the corporeal world. So marriage and divorce here, right, in the corporeal world. So incarnate men and women, and he says, can experience marriage many times without finding the company of a kindred souls, right? So uh, what he's saying here is that normally we marry a man, for example, marry a woman here on earth, which is not exactly the let's say this soul that has total affinity with him, right? So why that happen, right? And I will explain here. Because as the principle of a cause and effect, it is necessary to redeem a debt connected with the wrong used sexual energy, right? So then he says, for example, human parents often receive as sons and daughters their ties from the past, with whom they redeem old debts, right? We saw some cases I think for last month, yeah. In that case that that example that I gave you, that Luis gave us, right? About a mature man that is married with a woman, but then he involved himself with a young girl, right? And then they cause a problem in his family with her wife and also with this young girl, right? So then next incarnation, such a young girl can come as his daughter, right? So this is basically what Andrea Luiz is saying here, right? Or suppose, for example, that a man is married and then in this same case, right? Let's say this man then involved with that young girl and then he abandoned his wife, right? And he leave his wife. So next incarnation they must redeem, let's say, that wrong that he did, right? And then basically he will marry again the same woman, right? And that woman, she does not remember exactly what happened in the past life, but she will bring with her lack of confidence in this husband, right? And then this may be a base for conflict and so on and so forth, right? So that's basically what Angelo is saying here. We must redeem all our wrongs from the past regarding the love, and then after that we can reunite with our real kindred soul, right? The person to whom we feel total affinity. So that's what he is saying here. Huh? And what about divorce, right? Divorce should not be encouraged or facilitated because on earth, and Luis says, there are no marriage without serious implication concerning the responsibility assumed by the couple, right? So imagine that we have a marriage of a certain marriage, and then the couple starts to fight among with each other, right? So they are although they fight each other, they did not marry by chance, right? There is a reason, right? So, and then the divorce. That's why divorce should not be encouraged. What should be encouraged is to bring them together, right? To bring harmony in that couple, and that is, of course. That involves the effort of both sides, right? So, but then when there are special cases under the says, and the Spiritism says, right, where divorce is the least of the evils in a couple's life. So imagine that the fights between the couple reach a point where a tragedy could happen, right? So in that case, it's better that they divorce, right? But what is important that Spiritism and that we say here, and that doesn't mean that the problem is solved, right? Because they just the couple just postponed the solution for the problem, because if they divorce today, in the future they will return again and will marry again, and in order to get the harmony that they should have edified, right, in that past life. So that's why Luis said here, divorce may happen. Bear in mind, however, that today's debtors, the couple in this case, will return tomorrow to settle their debts, right? So it means that the couple will reunite again in the future, right? And they will, naturally, they will feel a kind of attraction, right? But also the let's say, the antipathy of what happened in the past. And then this will happen until they can, let's say, eliminate all the antipathy and then build the love, right, in their life. Then that is the main goal, right? Because as we learn in Spiritism, after all, at the end of the day, love is what will remain, right? So we may remain, right? So that's what we have here about marriage and divorce. And then about the emotional conduct, uh, what is the emotional conduct, right, of ourselves here on Earth? Well, so Anjali says that the higher the degree of the soul's perfection, of our perfection, the more we will demand from ourselves the discipline regarding emotion, right? So meaning that when we have enough degree of our soul perfection, then if I am married to a person, I will remain faithful to that person, right? So as André says here, right? The person will release its sexual energy only with its soul partner, right? Or through ennobling service. So that's very interesting also here, because we can direct our sexual energy here in this case when I'm married only with my partner, not looking outside, right? And then, but also through ennobling service, right? So uh, this is what Freud used to say, right? The sublimation of the sex instinct, right? Uh, the libido, they used to say, right? So is when, for example, a person he does not marry, for example, but dedicate him or herself, in the case of a woman, to a social service, for example, right? Imagine, for example, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, for example, right? She didn't marry, right? She dedicated herself to help people, poor people there in India, right? So Mother Teresa of Calcutta, uh, actually, she directed her sexual energy through ennobling service, right? So that's what Anjali is saying here. And when the person is married, right? Even when the marriage is broken by death, for example, one of the couple dies, pass away, the deceased partner remain connected to the survival one, right? In a constructive activity, right? For example, if you're a man is married to a woman, they have children, but then the man passed away, right? So they, as this is the person, he will continue helping his living wife to educate their children, right? So that's what Angela is saying here, right? And they also may help the partner in spiritually constructive endeavors, right? It happens always in a spiritist environment, let's say, right? For example, the couple works in a spiritist center, right? Then, let's say, the man passed away. So the woman, the wife works in that spiritist center as a medium, for example, right? So this is the husband will not only continue to work in that spirit center as a spirit, but it will also assist in her wife, his living wife, right, in her work there on the spirit center. So that's very interesting, because we realize here that love has no barriers, no frontier, right? So death is not a barrier to life, right? Love, right? Love is always present, and whatever is the condition of the people involved in that situation, this or that situation. So this is basically what I have today for this part two of the book Evolution to Worlds. We saw lots of spirit chapters, but they are very short chapters, right? Just most of them are just one one page. Then, so we have all these chapters today, and then next month we will end this book by looking at the remaining chapters of this part two of this book. So thank you for having me, and I hand over to Esteban.
Wonderful. Thank you, Watanabe. Thank you. Very good explanation. Interesting thing about you when you said about the Jesus has no sex. It's our imperfection who needs to name him as a father.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I like it. So thank you. It's a good lesson learned.
Yeah.
Lesson learned. Let me see if you do have any questions here. No, just Pat saying thank you
Okay.
for this very interesting and thought-provoking special talk. So many meaningful insights to reflect on. So thank you,
Yeah.
Pat, for your kindness.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you again, Roberto, for your time.
Right.
Our next session in September.
Oh,
when gonna happen?
September. September. Let me see. September. Oh. Uh, 15th of September.
15th of September.
15th of September. Then we'll finish this book.
Yeah. So 15th of September we will have part 8, and is
Yeah.
the ending of this book,
Yeah.
and we will start another book from October.
From October. Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
We-
Good. That's good. That's good. So
Okay.
thank you so much for everything. Thank you again, Pachi, and all those friends who are online with us. So,
Right.
Nathan, would you mind to do the final prayer for us?
Good.
Okay, good.
Okay. So let's thank all the spiritual benefactors that are always assisting us in this meeting that we have every month, studying this spiritist doctrine. And then we also thank Jesus for this opportunity of being reunited here in his name with his blessing. And finally, we will thank God for the joy, the gift of a life that he gave us, and in order to allow us to evolve intellectually and morally until we can reach God there in the far future, but it will happen anyway. Thank you. So be it.
So be it. Amen. So, thank you.
Thank
Once
you.
again, have you guys a great end of the day, or a great night, or a great day, depends if where you're watching this. And we will be back on the 15th of September with the part number 8.
Right.
Okay? Tatanabe, thank you so much for your time, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.